Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. It's the Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the first part thereof for the 2nd of February 2024. Numbers, struggling with numbers today, which is going to be fun because I'm just about to talk to you about numbers. I'm still feeling a bit rough, to be fair. Right, okay, Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply. You can find those caveats in the description to the video below. 830 personnel is not as high as we've seen for the last couple of days, but still a significant number of personnel lost. 9 tanks, likewise. 19 APVs, not as high as we have seen, but still a significant number there too. And then 46 artillery systems. The Russians appear to be losing an incredible amount of these on a daily basis at the moment. Now, how accurate is that? That's a question we're always asking. 46 is a huge number. Does that include mortar? Some of them heavier mortars, probably. Do we have evidence for all of these being taken out? No, we don't. Are we going to get to a point where the Russians reach this kind of tipping point of not being able to hit the Ukrainians as hard with their artillery in terms of artillery ammunition and a lack of pieces? You would think so, but that doesn't seem to have happened yet. There are still areas on the front line where they are heavily bombarding the Ukrainians. So yeah, they are. It would appear able to replace these lost pieces, if indeed they are losing them at those rates. They're able to replace them by pulling them out of deep storage. 2 multiple launch rocket systems. 1 warship, which I reported on yesterday in my breaking news piece. 49 vehicles and fuel tanks, so another really heavy day in that category, and 8 pieces of special equipment likewise there too. So I think that's goodness me, that warship pretty much, the rest is kind of fades into insignificance compared to one $60 million warship. Let's look at Andrew Perpetua's lost stats for the day before, and as you can see, it's another challenging day for the Russians. That goes some way towards justifying these general staff figures. The Russians losing there about 4 or 5 times what the Ukrainians have lost in the last 24 hours. We look at the Ukrainian losses. We see that surveillance equipment there, a couple of T-64BV tanks, and the rest kind of fairly low level losses. A few Lancet hits there. We're going to talk about Lancet coming back onto the scene. I've noticed there's been this big uptick of Lancet attacks. I've noted that a couple of times recently, saying, "Oh, they seem to be back in the zone with those." And actually, there's some statistics that support that and a theory as to why that is the case as well. When we look at the Russian losses, it's just an absolute ton of stuff. If the Russians keep losing equipment at this rate, they are not going to be able to prevail at all. So we've got electronic warfare system, a CKJ 1704 mobile 300W, drone suppression system, then some surveillance and comms equipment. You've obviously got the Project 12411, even Ivanovets ship that was sunk yesterday. That's huge. We've got a multiple launch rocket system, some other howitzers thrown in there, a number of tanks ranging from T-80s, T-72s, T-62s, up to a T-90 there, so T-90 damage. Tank was abandoned after it ran over a mine. Evacuation effort was hit by first-person view drone. So that's interesting. They tried to recover it, but the recovery vehicle was itself done over. So that is a number of destroyed tanks there and a few damaged ones, but it depends how damaged they are. And how recoverable they are. Infantry fighting vehicles, a few of those, BMP-2s and 1s, and then a lot of APCs there, BTRs and MTLBs, a number taken out by FPV drones, drone drop bombs as well. Trucks and civilian vehicles, as you can imagine, an awful lot of those on the list as well. So just a whole suite of Russian losses that far outweigh the Ukrainian losses, and that's the evidence we are being presented with. Now, when we come to the ship, obviously I reported on this widely yesterday. It was reported on widely yesterday. 40 sailors were thought to be on board. This was in the northwestern area of Crimea. I think it's just outside the lake. There's this inlet lake. I don't think the drones got inside there, even though that was geolocated yesterday. I think it was just near there, but I could be wrong on that. So, as reported, the department's search and rescue operations are currently ongoing. I don't think you're going to find an awful lot there because that sunk very clearly, as was recorded by those drones. And I think we have really reached a new point in time now. We've seen this in terms of aerial drones, where the low-cost aerial drones, and that includes attack drones like Shaheeds, are able to cause widespread damage. And we've seen in the Red Sea, low-cost drones, and of course some missiles, but let's concentrate on drones, are able to give, warships really expensive bits of kit. But if you're talking about land attacks, capital cities are under threat. Huge pieces of infrastructure, expensive infrastructure, are vulnerable to low-cost drones that can effectively be harnessed by anyone with the money and technological wherewithal, but basically just the money to be able to procure those. So, terrorist groups, non-state actors, anyone can threaten anywhere in the world with aerial drones. And that is a challenge, and it's something that we've seen evolve during this war. And now we've got to this stage where we thought we would be previously. There was talk about this early on in the war with the advent of these drones, but they hadn't quite succeeded in a way that they did yesterday. When you had, and I was explaining, I've got my two twin boys upstairs who've got two 13-year-old boys staying around for a sleepover. One of them must have a super geeky dad who's interested in this kind of stuff, because he was talking to me about Israel, Palestine, about Ukraine, about this and that, and it was like I had this fascinating conversation. It's like, why aren't my kids as interested in this as you are? Anyway, we're talking about the strike on the ship, and saying, look, you've got 5 drones that are effectively fairly low cost compared to this ship. And we've got to a point where a naval vessel of like one of the greatest navies in the world is sunk by a bunch of drones, and there's not a lot it can do about that, particularly on its own. So we're in a position where drones can surround a ship. You've got 5 or 6 drones, and we'll talk about that in a second, are coming at the ship from different angles, and the main source of defense for that ship will be some kind of heavy machine gun. Of course, if they're coming from all different angles, you've got maybe 1 or 2 heavy machine guns that are trying to take out 6 drones. They can't do that. They're facing one way, looking at those drones, where the drones from that side are coming and hitting. So they are unable to deal with drones used in this way. And what we've been waiting for is enough. You don't want to send like 1 or 2 drones at these ships. You want to send 5 or 6 simultaneously. And then these ships have very little chance unless they've got helicopter coverage, unless there's multiple ships, defending each other. This is changing the way like navies will operate, I'm sure. This is a significant point in military history, really. That's how significant yesterday was, in my opinion. So the way that the drones attacked as well, very cleverly going to the back of the ship, the stern, where you've got your steering and you've got your propulsion. So then if you knock that out, then the ship is basically a sitting duck. And then you hit it on the side, and then you hit it on the side where it's already been hit. So there's this hole in the side, and we see one of the drones go into that hole. So you're getting further penetration in. It's just really well done. As this person says, we'll analyze this later, but initially, great tactics, disabled steering gear machinery, TIC to identify the main engine compartments and hit those. Great work. The ship was defending itself with small arms fire. Maybe one drone was disabled. Yeah, and then those missiles on board cooked off. Massive. Anyway, it's been reported that Ukraine sinks a ship that's full of Ukrainian POWs. 1,632 POWs on board that ship, just about to be swapped. Ukrainians blew it up. Absolute travesty for Ukraine. What a shot in the foot for Ukraine. It's an absolute disaster. I can't believe it happened. obviously nonsense. That's not what happened, and that's not what was reported. But this is a nice bit of satire, a bit like irony. Instead of made out of iron, it's made out of satin or something. I don't know. But this is the sort of thing that the Russians could say in response to that hit. In fact, if we go and look at what some of the Russian reactions were, this is Squatson's Aiden, who is like a really annoying, very prevalent Russian voice on Twitter. Yeah, lots of pro-Ukrainians absolutely detest this entity, as do I. It says, again, Ukraine is expending massive resources and time targeting a 35-year-old BLS surface ship that had zero impact on the war, literally has been stuck in a lake for 2 years with no enemy navy to engage. Well, it's a $60 million ship, 40 to 50 naval personnel on board, sailing around, gets blown up, gets sunk. This is incredibly embarrassing for the Russians, and this is how you interpret that, maybe. And so everyone was hitting this guy with like cope. It may have not have been like the most high value Black Sea Fleet ship, as in, does it fire cruise missiles? Is it involved in activities doing X, Y, and Z? I don't know. But this is a massive blow to the Russians, and this is hugely embarrassing. And there's absolutely no surprise that you see reactions like this, trying to scrabble around for some kind of interpretation of this not being as bad as it is. This is bad for the Russians. One by one, the ships are being sunk and turned into submarines. This is not good. Over 20% of the Black Sea Fleet now destroyed, and the Black Sea Fleet hiding in Novorossiysk is a huge blow to the Russians, to their PR. In the last 48 hours, 3 Russian warships have been attacked, thanks to a couple of sources for picking up the satellite imagery. Right. This is not definitely true, by the way. So Intel Schizo reporting on this. Some people are reporting on this. Not everyone agrees. There's smoke coming from ships, can be coming from funnels, from satellite imagery. So, just be warned that this is, I would say, 50-50. Second vessel, 50 meters in length, is smoking, roughly 2.5 kilometers from Crimea's Cape Chersonets near Sevastopol, probably a Sonya-class minesweeper. Third vessel nearby doing evasive maneuvers. May or may not be true. It wouldn't surprise me if there are multiple things being hit. Now, I showed you a picture recently of a load of those drones, those naval drones, lined up in some kind of warehouse, thinking, that's an absolute ton of those things. They've got a lot of these things. And I think they are being used often when we don't hear about them. I think things happen and we don't know. It's only when something is so successful as this that it's like blasted over the internet. But there will no doubt be a fairly consistent use of these. But I also think that it wouldn't be surprising if there were multiple targets hit at the same time, or targeted at the same time yesterday. Ukraine spy boss, so that's Budanov, Lieutenant General Budanov, told me that the Ivanovets was hit with 6 Magura V5 sea drones that sent it to the bottom of the Black Sea. He vows that more such attacks will take place, and has a message from Moscow. Get ready, he said. So Magura V5, I actually haven't brought up a picture of that. So let's do Magura V5 drone. And it's going to look like those sort of sea baby drones that we have seen, as you can see there. Let's look at images. Yeah, so it's going to be something like that. There it is. What we've seen be used before to attack ships, but here we have 6 of them there. That's what you want. A bunch of those going into a ship, going towards a ship. They're going to panic. How they're going to take out all of those at the same time. So 6 drones is the claim. We're going to go to another loss here that is being widely reported right now, unconfirmed, but it seems to be legit. One of Russia's servicemen who died during a missile attack in occupied Crimea. So if you remember the claims about Belbek Air Base being hit a couple of nights ago, and some people claiming that up to 20 people died, maybe 10 died, another 10 wounded, and 3 jets maybe have taken out, so on and so forth. And there's a lot of skepticism about exactly what happened. But there was definitely something hit. There was big smoke coming up, cruise missiles sent into there. And now it's being widely reported that Alexander Tatarenko, who's a commander of the aviation squadron Lieutenant General Alexander Tatarenko was killed, and he's pretty high up. This is like, you got pictures of him meeting Putin and so on and so forth. At least 10 died when Ukraine hit Belbek airfield. 3 planes were also hit, is the claim, but this seems to be somewhat more legit. Just a reminder, we're coming up for 35 days, and Gerasimov has not been seen. Where is Gerasimov? I think he died in Crimea, or is very, very injured. So that was on a previous hit 35 days ago. Here is Russia on fire, Southern Republic of Dagestan. It's a general store that's flaming, but my goodness, that is burning pretty spectacularly. Those kind of fires are taking place on a regular basis. Let's go to distant strikes, where last night we saw 24 drones being sent into Ukraine by Russia, and of them 11 were shot down. And then the claim is that 7 more lost their way. So actually that's 17 out of 24. I don't think that's 11 intercepted, and of those 7 lost their way. I do believe it's this way round. So the interception rate, if you like, is actually 17 out of 24, which is better. Still 7 did get through and probably find their targets. 7 not finding their way implies that electronic warfare is being successful in taking out these drones, and I think that is that's good news for the Ukrainians, because we're starting to get to a point where new capabilities are being brought to bear, and they are being effective. A Ukrainian Gepard here. This is just one of those bits of footage that is quite nice, because you can draw a little conclusion from that. It's these little bits of data that you can pick up. So on the side of that, you've got 3 cruise missiles and 5 Shaheeds, notched, painted on the side. And actually, we don't know what's painted on the other side. They've run out of space on that one, so it could be more on the other side. But at the very least, that one Gepard has taken out 8 bits of kit, 3 cruise missiles there, for that old, effectively fairly old bit of anti-aircraft mechanics. Now that was that's, I think, really useful, that they are being provided with these, and continue to be provided with these. So there are more coming. The ones from Jordan, I think Rheinmetall are doing some up. There's ammunition for these being produced now. Gepard's great. They need as many of these as they can get, and they need obviously the Skynex, which is a modern replacement to these. They need more of those. There are now 2 batteries, I think, operating in Ukraine, with another 2 on the way, is it? Or another 4 on the way? I can't quite remember. But anyway, this is it's good to see Gepards being effective. Air Force Downs 11 of 24, as mentioned. They were launched from Primorsko-Akhtarsk in Russia, and from Chowder in Russian-occupied Crimea. So it's one of those places that you would expect to see targeted by Ukrainian missiles to stop them operating from there. Ukraine's Air Force reported that at least 7 Russian drones failed to reach their targets and were lost in the area. Some 11 Russian drones were intercepted over Dnipropetrovsk, Kherson, Kirovohrad, Kirovohrad, and Kharkiv Oblast. So they've been flying around in a number of places. Most of them targeted critical infrastructure in Dnipropetrovsk, by all accounts. And Russia also dropped another bomb on its own territory, this time in occupied Luhansk. As to reports, it came down in the town of Zmyhorod, something like that. 20 kilometers, it's too early, 20 kilometers west of Luhansk city. This is what happens when you are woken up at 4:15 in the morning by boys having lively conversations, all in one bedroom. If anyone wants a couple of children, I've got them. Residents were evacuated, and the FOB 500 will be removed today. That's not the first time that's happened, that's for sure. Right, moving on. So I didn't know this had happened, but apparently drones the other night had targeted a mine in Kryvyi Rih. The drone attack had caused the miners, over 100 of them, 113 of them, to be trapped in 2 mines. They've now been rescued, so they're out of the mines. That's all good news there. Good news for something I wasn't aware had even happened. So that goes to this idea that Ukraine is hit by Russian munitions on a regular basis. We don't always hear about it, and so we can be led to think, Ukraine's not doing too badly, or all is well. The Russians haven't appeared to have caused too much damage to Ukrainian infrastructure. That's not always the case, right? There are things that happen, and due to operational security, they aren't plastered over the socials. Now, talking about Lancets, and I hinted about this earlier, Ukrainian strike could disrupt production of Russia's deadliest drone, according to Forbes. Well, what was this? So back in August, there was an explosion at basically a Lancet production facility in the Zagorsk optical mechanical plant in Sergeyev Posad near Moscow. I no doubt reported that in my strike segment, and then I didn't necessarily report that the Lancets, we weren't seeing many Lancets, but I did report we were starting to see more Lancets on things like video feeds and Andrew Perpetua's lost stats, and so I noted this uptick around sort of here, and actually recently as well. This appears, now I can't speak to the provenance of this data, of the accuracy of this data, but the claim is that after August, the Lancet production absolutely, dropped hugely there, and has been climbing up steadily since, although another drop maybe from November to December. There could be another strike on that facility, I don't know, but we are starting to see Lancets being used much more freely by the Russians, and this could indicate that they've got their production capacities back up to what they were after having had the facility hit. Now, this morning, there are unknown drones flying over Bryansk in Russia. So the Ukrainians are still, active in the airwaves, in the sky with their attacks on Russia. And speaking of these attacks deep into Russia, Russia's State Duma has said it's impossible to protect St. Petersburg from drones. Quote, the Defense Ministry does not have sufficient air defense resources to fully protect St. Petersburg from drone raids, according to the Defense Committee Chairman Andrei Kartapolov. This is something I've been talking about an awful lot over the last few months or so. It's that blanket analogy I keep mentioning. Blanket's not big enough for the bed. You put it in one direction, it exposes part of the bed down there. So you put it back there, it exposes somewhere else. The air defense network of Russia is very much the same. They're having to protect the front line. They're having to protect assets within Crimea and in the occupied territories in Ukraine. And that's where a great deal of their air defense systems are going to be focused. But at the same time, they need to protect St. Petersburg. They need to protect Moscow, Yekaterinburg, all these major cities, and not just like civilian infrastructure, but key energy infrastructure and the industrial military complex facilities littered throughout what is a massive country, geographically speaking. It is vast, right? You've got facilities all over Ukraine all over Russia that they need to protect. Given that Ukrainian missiles and drones can now reach 1,250 kilometers at least, and so they just don't have enough systems. Given the attrition of air defense systems we've seen since the beginning of the war, they don't have enough systems to defend places like St. Petersburg, second biggest city in Russia, and with huge oil facilities nearby and incredibly important potential targets to protect. They just can't do it, and that of course is music to the Ukrainians' ears. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces here. Ukraine has asked Russia to return the bodies. I was thinking about how clever this is and how risky it also is, because by formally asking for them, if Russia gives the bodies, you might find that they've got like bullet holes in them. They've had to kill them to give the bodies back because they haven't been killed in the air crash, or I don't know, but or arguably this could be very clever as well. Ukraine has asked Russia to return the bodies of the POWs, which, if it's true, right, if that Il-76 was shot down in Belgrade did have POWs on board, then Ukraine need those bodies back to reconcile them with their families. We need those. Yeah, okay, you claim that we killed 65 POWs. Can we have them back, please? And if they're not given back to Ukraine, it's like, well, where are they? Oh, they weren't on the plane. I think it's pretty much safe now to assume that those POWs were not on the plane. This was a Russian ruse. What you don't want is Russia to return the bodies that they've had to then subsequently kill in order to try and justify the downing of the plane. That would be my only worry. But, Ukraine are well within their rights to ask those bodies back. If you claim that they are dead, that we shot the plane down, well, first of all, it would be rather useful if you showed us some evidence that that's happened. There is literally zero evidence. You're not allowing independent investigators to come and check it out. You didn't allow your own emergency services to check it out. Your own security services sorted out the scene, and you released some limited footage showing precisely no bodies. Eventually some footage with a tiny bit of very bright pink blood in one or two areas. You're like, if this had over 70 people on board and that crashed, you would see these bodies littered all over the place, right? But you haven't. There's no evidence of this. It was taken off from Belgorod, not Langdon. It had come from Iran that day. So where are they picking up? All of the evidence suggests that it didn't have POWs on board. I think that's done and dusted now. Now, talking about POWs, here we have some. This is Russia. Spray down your returning POWs at a cold, depressing airport. Load them onto buses like cattle, and probably tell them they have 2 days before being remobilized. So, as Sharky here says, no heroes welcome, waiting for the Russians. No families, no celebrations, no joy. Probably will be turned around and sent back to the front. Complete contrast to returning POWs. Now, this is definitely prima facie true, right? This is how the Russians are. Look, they're spraying them down, literally spraying them down at the airport as they get off the plane. All of these guys, by the way, look fairly healthy. None of them look emaciated. Really worth noting that. They've all got decent uniform on. Look at them return. I mean, these guys are healthy, and the most they're giving is a sort of a smile and a wave to their own Russian servicemen who are recording this, right? Loaded onto buses, and that's how the news are reporting. This is coming from a Russian news agency, right? This is how the Ukrainians report their POWs coming back. Like this is how it is for Ukraine. So the difference is stark, right? It's quite incredible. This is how you win the PR war. And the Russians are just not doing a very good job. Possibly partly because they're not actually greeting their soldiers like this. They just, ship them back in a thoroughly sterile military situation, and then eventually send them on their way, probably put them on the train to get to their home, rather than bussing in their families to meet them. You look at this guy, thin, and in fact, I think his dad says, "Look, you look at your face; it's really thin." These guys are returned, to heroes welcome by friends and family, and it's an endearing bit of video to watch, but it just shows the difference between these two sides, who is winning the information war in this respect. Right, and you got a flag with the Ukrainian army trident on there. Yeah. Sorry. This morning, Alexander Prokudin said, if I'm reading this right, says Andrew Perpetua, there were 4 dozen airstrikes, more than 400 attack drones, and 2,793 artillery strikes, firing 13,741 total shells into the Kherson region. So this is, it appears, 1 day's worth of battery. This is how much the Russians are battering Kherson area. More than 1,000 artillery strikes, 400 drone strikes, almost 4 dozen airstrikes. In total, 2,793 shots, or 13,741 fired shells. For some, it's a scary statistic. For the residents of the Kherson region, it is a terrible present. During January, the occupying forces continued to mercilessly cover the peaceful settlements of the region with fire. Sorry, that looks like that's a January stats. High-rise buildings, private homes, medical facilities, schools, and other civilian objects came under attack. 122 people were injured due to Russian terror. Unfortunately, 23 of them died. My condolences to the relatives and friends from whom the Russians took dear people. Now, I do want to question something here. It's like, how do you record each individual shell hitting an area? I don't get that. Like, who's there with the clipboard, and how do you record a wide area, right? So if you're one person that's recording it, you are recording for a certain area, right? And then you've got another area someone else has to record because you're recording it for the whole Kherson region, right? So how do you know that you aren't double counting shells? That are like, if you just in the distance hear that, you're like, well, there's another one. You know, are they employing people just to sit there recording shell strikes? So I don't understand how, you know, how do you know that the next person along didn't record that same one? It just seems very granular statistics. Unless there's a way that this can be counted using AI and technology. So technology can track individual shells. That would be the most likely way that this happens. If someone knows about this, I mean, that's how counter-battery radars work, isn't it? So you're tracking the trajectory of an incoming shell, and then you're right, okay, we can work out where that's come from so we can fire back at it. That's how you do counter-battery fire. But maybe using that same technology, you can actually count the number of shells that are fired into the Kherson region. You'd have to have decent like radars set up all along that line, but that would be the only way. But it seems incredible that these stats are even available and that they're accurate. In Moscow, a 76-year-old man is... this is what freedom looks like in Russia. Boom. In Moscow, a 76-year-old man is uncontactable after being arrested last night for the crime of wearing a coat with the words "Russia without Putin." That's freedom, guys. All of you trolls in the threads there, all of you Kremlin paid-up trolls, this is what you're arguing for. Yay! Freedom, liberty. You can't have something written on your coat that says Russia without Putin. I can go out, just to let you know, guys, I can go out on my road today and say, Sunak sucks balls, right? I'm going to have a hoodie on with that written in bright letters. And do you know what? I ain't going to be arrested. Because, you know, freedom of speech. Because, you know, UK has more liberty than Russia. Russia is a fascist state. And they think the coat is a threat and shows support for the extremist Navalny, who's in prison for another 30 years for what? Being an opposition politician. That's what freedom looks like in Russia. Russian military bloggers are properly triggered by Solovyov's statement here. This is another, what is it? What's the segment called? Oh yeah, this is what freedom looks like in Russia, where he called for anyone who spoke about the Novomykolivka disaster. So this is where I showed you loads of FPV drones taking out a whole column of equipment in Novomykolivka. It was an absolute disaster. Russian attack last couple of days where they lost pretty much everything. He said anyone that speaks about that, where a Russian column was completely devastated, should be jailed and destroyed for spreading Ukrainian disinformation. It's not disinformation, it's literally on camera. Literally provable fact. Where you've got the column driving, the column getting filmed, getting blown up, and the column in flames. Like, I don't know how that's disinformation. But if you want to lock people up and destroy them, if you're espousing that on national television, then that is not freedom of speech, that's not liberty, and that is a fascistic state. And, just to clear this up, Solovyov, you suck. And this is what's that segment I keep doing? Oh yeah, this is what freedom looks like in Russia. Anton Goroschenko reports Putin has ordered the jailing of at least 12 hypersonic technology developers. And we reported on this previously. I don't really know why, but all are charged with the article of state treason allegedly for selling classified information. BBC News Russia has reported. Now, I say I don't know why. That's a reason they give. I don't really know why. I mean, are they actually selling the information or on the technology, or are they more likely supposedly producing missiles that don't do what they're claimed to do, so that when Putin declared like the Kinzhal dagger is like unstoppable, you ain't going to do anything with this, and it gets shot down easily by patriots. I say easily, but relatively easily considering what the claims were. Then maybe he's taking it out on the developers. So the FSB began to closely monitor specialists in this field after 2018. Then Putin presented the hypersonic missiles, quote, which have no analogues, in his message to the Federal Assembly. Putin praised their speed, maneuverability, and ability to overcome all missile defense systems. Lawyer Yevgeny Smirnov, who defended the defendants in the cases, said that the private conversations FSB officers admitted that the case against the scientists are initiated, quote, at the high will, in other words, Putin, and that they personally report every accusation to Putin. In this way, they are trying to show that Russian missile technology is being hunted by spies. I suppose it keeps up the idea that the technology is so good because the Americans are after the technology. And if we arrest the people who are developing it, then it shows that our technology is coveted by international enemies. And of course, it's not, I doubt that's particularly true. There's a really good video on hypersonic missile technology and hypersonic missiles in general by Perun that talks about the trade-off between cost and speed. And actually, in order to get something to go so quickly, the warhead needs to be a lot smaller. And actually, you forgo a number of things. And that is arguably better to have cheaper, bigger warheads on, say, cruise missiles that still get through, Storm Shadows. I would argue that Storm Shadows are more effective than Kinzhal daggers, even though you're going to struggle to shoot them down unless you've got the very best air defenses. It turns out you struggle to shoot down Storm Shadows with the very best air defenses. And so the Americans are a nation, for example, that has given up going down the hypersonic missile route and is going more for accuracy, bigger warheads, cheaper, etc., etc. So Russia is kind of on its own. I think the Chinese might be trying it as well, but Russians are kind of on their own in the world and like going, yeah, hypersonic. And so Putin comes out and says, yeah, hypersonic missiles, check us out. No one's going to stop these missiles. Look how good this is. And it's a really big kind of almost like Star Wars type arms race thing that we saw in the space race and whatnot between the two Cold War enemies. Well, this was Putin's opportunity to go, look at us, we're better than the US. And then it's got to this point in the war where these missiles have been actually quite underwhelming, and he's now arresting loads of the people who designed them. So to assuage the ego, to show that Russian missiles are the best and that they are trying to steal them, Smirnov says. Almost all cases of state treason against scientists have developed in the same way. Special services came to the institutes and searched among the international projects for something that, quote, fits as well as possible. Then again, the fewer researchers in Russian institutes, the fewer missiles created by them for war. This is quite interesting. It's like, yeah, you go ahead and arrest all the people that are designing your very best weapons, because ain't no one going to want to do that in the future because of the risk, and those guys aren't going to be continuing to design stuff. So go and arrest them, put them in prison, not a problem as far as calculating where you would like Russia to be in terms of their arms industry. Okay, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate all your support. Take care. Till the pit. Speak soon.